It might just be you today. I haven't seen David around.
Yeah, he's right here.
Too bad. He's fun. Shoot. Oops, where'd all these people go? Hello. How's everyone?
Good. I made cookie sandwiches.
Cookie sandwiches? Like an Oreo?
No, like it was like I had baked some chocolate chip cookies and I had some like chocolate icing.
Oh, okay. I see. That sounds pretty decadent.
Yeah, I'm gonna give some to my neighbors.
Yeah,
I think I baked too much for me and my mom.
nice. They will enjoy that, I'm sure. All right, David, Chennai, AJ, Marilyn in person. No Victoria yet. I'll give her like 2 minutes before I mark her absent. Ba-ba-ba-ba-do-do-do-do-do. Ooh. She might show up yet. We'll see. Okay. So on Canvas, I've posted two things, and we're going to look at the one that's just a link first. Here she comes. Here's Victoria. Let me go change that attendance before we continue. Present. If you look at Canvas, the first thing that I posted today is AP Lang rhetorical term vocabulary list. And it kind of serves a dual purpose. We are going to have a quiz on these next Friday, but I wanted to give you a little bit more time than we usually have with normal vocab because there's more of them and they're also a little bit more complicated to understand because these are all rhetorical terms, things that might particularly come up on the multiple choice section of the AP exam. And these are some of the more like, I feel like we know all the basic ones, right? Like diction, syntax, repetition, alliteration, metaphors, these things. But there are a lot more. I mean, there are so many more than we could probably even cover in one whole class. But these are some I have gone through like previous exams to see like what are some of the terms that are getting used regularly on exams that students aren't just going to know. And so I have posted a list and I want to go through the list with you first. And there's an example from each one. And then I'll walk you through what the assignment is. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Marilyn, it's the AP Lang rhetorical term vocabulary list. It just opens into a Google Doc. I want to share my screen so that we can kind of move through them together. And even though the first three start with A, they are not in alphabetical order, not really in any kind of order. So the first one, which looks like anaphora, is actually pronounced anaphora. And it's the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses. And the example that I have is from somewhere in the Bible. I couldn't tell you where. But the repetition of the voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord makes the deer give birth and strips the forest bare, and in his temple all cry glory. So it's that repetition. Go ahead.
I knew a girl at summer camp named Anaphora.
Really?
Yeah.
Like her one name is Anaphora, or like her name is Anna and her last name's Phora?
Her first name.
Did she pronounce it Anaphora or Anaphora?
Anaphora. That's what I meant to say.
No, that's okay. That's one that everybody mispronounces, but like as long as you can identify it. That's so strange. I wonder if her mother was an English teacher.
I think she was from out. She was like there for like the summer. She wasn't from America.
Oh, how interesting. Huh. Wait, what? Oh shoot. Okay, I'll fix that after we get through this. Wow, I really thought I fixed that. So it's the repetition of that first little clause, and you can see that kind of just helps like establish this sense of repetition that makes it stick out more in the audience's or the reader's ear or eyes. This is a thing that gets used in speeches a lot. In fact, my brother-in-law used this technique in his wedding vows to my sister. And afterwards I was like, did you know that you were doing anaphora? He was like, no, you're a nerd. I don't know what that means. But he did it, and it was really effective and lovely. The second one is antithesis, another one that kind of looks like it's pronounced a little differently. But if you look at antithesis, that's exactly what it is. It's when two opposite ideas are put together in a sentence to achieve a contrasting effect. And a couple of examples I have here from the moon landing: one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. It's two kind of opposite ideas, but to put it together makes sense. And from A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. Both sort of opposites of each other. Okay, the next two that we're going to look at are actually really similar to each other, and it's very likely that on a test they would be sort of interchangeable. But I've been really specific about the difference in them. So an aphorism is a statement of truth or opinion expressed in a concise or witty manner, and they often just sound like cliches, like little phrases that you've heard before. Like pride goeth before a fall, the simplest questions are the hardest answered, don't judge a book by its cover. Those are all aphorisms. A maxim is really similar to an aphorism, but it tends to be more personal, like specific to a person or a group, but it's just a short, pithy statement that expresses a general truth or rule of conduct. And the example I picked there was from Animal Farm. They said 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. That was kind of the maxim that they adopted. And, you know, that wouldn't apply to everyone. Like, that doesn't make sense in every context, but it was their sort of personal statement. The next one is apostrophe. And I know that you all know like the apostrophe when you're doing possessive stuff, but in this example of what an apostrophe is, and this is more of like a theater term actually, it's when a writer or a speaker directly addresses someone who is not present or dead, or speaks to an inanimate object. So an example that we all know is the nursery rhyme, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, How I Wonder What You Are. That's an apostrophe. They're talking to the star. Star can't hear them. Another example, I think y'all have all read Romeo and Juliet. Right before she dies, she's talking to her dagger that she's going to use to kill herself, and says, "Oh, happy dagger, this is thy sheath, there rust and let me die." And then she stabs herself with it. And since she's addressing this inanimate object, this dagger, that qualifies as apostrophe. Didactic is the next one. It means intended to teach, particularly intended for moral instruction rather than entertainment. This tends to be like sort of a genre. Fables are didactic, you know, like the tortoise and the hare teaches the lesson that slow and steady wins the race. Sermons are intended to be didactic. The 30 Days Have September poem, if y'all know that one, 30 Days Have September, April, June, and November. It's to teach you your lines. Hubris. Hubris is a term that we take from Greek drama, Greek tragedies. It means excessive pride or self-confidence, and specifically how this excessive pride challenges the gods and is a character's ultimate downfall. It doesn't have to refer just to Greek mythology or drama. You can talk about it with anything. My example from Greek mythology is Arachne, who challenges Athena's weaving skills and is consequently turned into a spider. She's like, "Oh, I'm better at weaving than the goddess Athena, so I'm going to show off." And Athena's like, "Nope, you suck. And because you were so cocky about it, I'm going to turn you into a spider." Or another example, which my English 4 students would be familiar with right now. Victor Frankenstein, I'm sure you all know, or at least have heard of him, who creates the monster. He believes that he's intelligent and powerful enough to create life from death, and consequently creates a destructive creature who ruins his life and kills like everybody he loves. Hubris was his downfall. He should have checked himself. Syntax. I think we're fairly familiar with syntax. I feel like this is a fairly easy one, but it's just the arrangement of words and phrases to create sentences. An example of traditional syntax, if we were going to say this in a traditional way, do not mourn them, do not miss them, attachment leads to jealousy, that is the shadow of greed. However, it's a very famous character who is known for his use of inverted syntax. And it is Yoda, and he says, mourn them not, miss them do not, attachment leads to jealousy, the shadow of greed, that is. We usually do subject, verb, rest of the sentence. Yoda tends to do rest of the sentence, subject, verb. The next one is juxtaposition, which is a super fun word to say. And that's an instance of two elements being placed close together for contrasting effect. Oxymorons are figures of speech in which two contradictory terms appear in juxtaposition to illustrate a rhetorical point, like jumbo shrimp. Shrimp by nature are small, so jumbo makes it an oxymoron. Another good example, I don't think that you guys have read The Great Gatsby at this point, unless you read it on your own. But the big famous Gatsby mansion is right next door to the narrator's little tiny shack. And that juxtaposition of their houses really shows the contrast in what they're like as people too. So the next two kind of go hand in hand, and it's easy to confuse them. So you want to make sure that you know which one is which. Deduction, our powers of deduction, is a method of reasoning from the general to the specific, where we start out with a general statement or hypothesis and examine the possibilities to reach a specific logical conclusion. So an example of that would be the scientific method. It uses deduction to test hypotheses and theories. Induction is the opposite of that. It's a conclusion that's reached through reasoning from specific to general. And a lot of times, if you use induction, the conclusions that you can reach could still be false. An example of that would be Harold is a grandfather, Harold is bald, therefore all grandfathers are bald. That's not accurate. You see the reasoning there, but it's not accurate. A syllogism, this also kind of goes in with the last two that we looked at, is a form of deductive reasoning that joins two or more premises to arrive at a conclusion. It's really similar to induction, except that it's all true. And it starts from general and goes more specific. So for an example there, all men are mortal, John is a man, therefore John is mortal. And it's always phrased that way, like this thing happens and this thing also happens, therefore the two of them work together. Deduction and induction don't necessarily follow that pattern. Addendum. That's hard to say. An addendum is an item of additional material added at the end of a book, article, or other publication. We have not read and will not read this year the book Columbine, but the last like 100 pages or so are all extra notes, appendices, and interviews and stuff like that. And those are all addendums to the text of the book. The next one is called appositives or apposition. We usually say appositives. That's a noun or a noun phrase that's followed by another noun or a noun phrase that renames or identifies it. This is really easy. It's just if you don't know that this is a thing, you don't know how to identify it. Some examples. John, my roommate, likes to eat Reese's cups that have been in the freezer. In that instance, my roommate is the appositive phrase because it's renaming John, which is the noun. Another example I have here, Olympic spectators are looking forward to watching Usain Bolt, the Jamaican sprinter. The Jamaican sprinter is going to be the appositive phrase there because it's renaming Usain Bolt. Talking about the same thing, just renaming it. The next one is polemic, either way, a strong verbal or written attack on someone or something. So for example, we did not look at this in here yet, we will. Jonathan Swift's satirical essay, A Modest Proposal, is a social polemic against the British government's treatment of the Irish in the 18th century. Another example I have here is, though he delivers it humorously, John Mulaney's sketch about how much he paid for college is definitely meant as a polemic against the cost of higher education in America. They're attacking this thing, the idea of it. The next one is also a fun word in my opinion, panegyric. And that's a public speech or published text in favor or praise of something or someone. So an example I have here is, despite the panegyric this person delivered about the benefits of block scheduling, I knew it would never work for our curriculum. So clearly someone has really like praised the block scheduling thing. Some other examples of that might be like a eulogy would be a panegyric, because you would be like talking about all the things that the person did in their life and like how fondly we'll remember them. An exhortation, and for the record, people do tend to confuse panegyric and exhortation, but they really don't mean the same thing. An exhortation is an address or communication emphatically urging someone to do something. The example here is that Lady Bird Johnson was known for her fear of public speaking, but she still managed to deliver an eloquent exhortation on pursuing your dreams to the graduates. So urging them to pursue their dreams. That's the thing about exhortation. You're actually exhorting the audience to do something, to act in some way. Chiasmus is the next one, another fun word to say. I wish I could remember, like recently my sister posted something and I was like, hey, that's chiasmus. Oh no, it wasn't. It was something that Joe Biden said in his, like when his speech when he was inaugurated. Shoot, I'm not gonna remember it. It was a really good example though. Whoever has chiasmus, you could look up Joe Biden chiasmus and use it as your example. It is a rhetorical device in which two or more clauses are balanced against each other by the reversal of their structures in order to produce an artistic effect. That sounds confusing. Once you know what it is, you'll be like, oh, that thing. My first example here is from Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, and the version with Brandy has just come to Disney Plus. So if you haven't seen it, you should. It's very good. And Whitney Houston plays the fairy godmother. It's wonderful. But there's a song in it, and the lyrics say, do I love you because you're beautiful, or are you beautiful because I love you? That flipping of the structure. And then I found this one as well. In the bluegrass region, a paradox was born. The corn was full of kernels, and the kernels full of corn, which I think is kind of funny. Different kind of kernel, but. All right, two left. You've probably heard of an anachronism before. And that's when there's a thing that's appropriate to a period other than the period in which it exists, especially a thing that is conspicuously old-fashioned. So for example, if there was a movie about ancient Egypt that showed Pharaoh wearing a wristwatch, that would be an anachronism. They didn't have wristwatches back then. The other example, which if you haven't seen this movie, you should because it's so good. The soundtrack to Baz Luhrmann's The Great Gatsby is entirely produced by Jay-Z and consists of mostly hip hop and alternative rock. So it presents an anachronism to the 1920s setting, which really works for that. Also, the movie Moulin Rouge does the same thing. It's the same director, and he just likes to do that stuff. And the last one, and we will talk at a lot more length about fallacies, probably fourth quarter. A fallacy is a mistaken belief, especially one based on unsound argument. I actually have beside me some posters that have come down, and one of them is like all the different types of fallacies. But right now you just need to know what a fallacy is. An example of that would be if you attack an opponent's character rather than their argument, like, oh, well, I don't believe anything David says, so even though he said this good, clever, true thing, I'm gonna pretend like it doesn't work, like it's not valid just because David's the one who said it. That's not fair, right? The second example I have is, if I don't pass this test, I'll fail the class, I won't graduate, I won't go to college, I'll never get a job, and I'll end up old and alone living in a van down by the river. again, that's like the logic doesn't pan out there. And a third example here is Martin Sheen played the president on television, so he would probably make a good president in real life too. That logic is very fallacious. Okay, so we've gone through them all. And for the record, if you have any issues with these over the weekend, feel free to email me. Marilyn just told me I don't have a submission thing on here for you to actually submit anything. So let me fix that. Okay, so I've assigned everybody to 4 different words from this list. For the words you're assigned, you're going to come up with an example of that term being used. Your example could be a sentence that you come up with, something you remember from literature or movies or TV, or an example of a type of written or spoken work that would qualify. And if that's confusing, you can just kind of refer back to my original list. Like my first example is a quote. Several of my examples are quotes. But then also like for didactic, fables, sermons, sort of a more general example. This is due Monday night. I'm going to compile all of these into a doc. I can actually show you guys. Do I have this somewhere? Yeah, like this was last year's, so don't steal somebody from last year. But what I'm going to do is compile them all into a Google Doc like this one and put your examples here and then create like a little bit of commentary on them. Like if this is a good example, I'll explain why. If it's not a good example, I'll point out how it could be better or why it doesn't work. And I'll do that before we meet on Tuesday. So we're going to go over it in class. So if you don't do this by Monday night, your classmates will know that you're a slacker. So David, your words are Anaphora, Antithesis, Aphorism, and Maxim. Aren't these all such strange words? Trinae, you're doing Apostrophe, Didactic, Hubris, and Syntax. AJ, Syntax, Juxtaposition, Deduction, and Induction. Marilyn, Syllogism, Addendum, Apostrophe, and Polemic. Victoria, Syllogism, Panegyric, Exhortation, and Chiasmus. And Kyla, Chiasmus, Anachronism, Fallacy, and Didactic. And yes, some of you have the same words, but it does not hurt to have more examples of what these look like. So Monday is an e-learning day, and I will send an email to all of my classes Monday morning to let you know, like, this is what you need to be doing today for this class. But what you guys need to do is finish this. I'm going to give you the rest of the class time today to work on it. But you'll finish this and submit it, and then you can work on your synthesis essay. But for now, I'm going to give you guys the rest of the time to work on this. Any questions before I let you guys go? I know this is a lot of information today, and most of these words are pretty unfamiliar to you. So again, like, as you're working on this, if you're confused about something or need to like double check with me to see if this example you're coming up with works, just email me and I will get back to you ASAP. Okay, so I will send you guys an email on Monday to remind you of what you need to be doing for AP on Monday. But those of you who are virtual, if you would like to leave and work on this independently, you can do that, and I will see you on Monday or Tuesday.